Good evening.
Hello, Jerry.
Hi, Jerry.
Hello, Sophia. Hello, Ursel.
Good evening. Welcome. All right. Good evening. Today is February 22nd, 2021. The time is 6 p.m. This is the City of Georgetown, Texas Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. And at this time, I'm going to ask that Myrna call the roll so we can officially establish which commissioners are in attendance. Myrna?
Good evening. Cherie Heinzman.
Here.
Kayla McCord. Marlene McMichael. Travis Perthius. Jay Warren. Jim Sawyer.
Here.
Ursula Brashear.
Here.
Alex Fuller.
Here.
Tim Haney. Jerry McCulley.
Here.
All right, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people in total in attendance. 2 of those are alternates, being Alex and Jim. Do I have the opportunity to bring both of those to the dais?
We have, this is Sophia Nelson. We have 3 regular members in attendance, as I see, and we need 4 for a quorum. So I believe that you would add just 1 more.
Okay, Alex, I think you are the person who's had the longest gap in attendance, so I'm going to ask you to participate in the meeting if you're prepared.
That'll be fine, Ursel.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we have a quorum, and I will now call the meeting to order. I want to welcome everyone to this special called P&Z Commission meeting. Tonight's meeting is a continuation of the February 16th, 2021 meeting, which was abbreviated due to the winter storm event, which thankfully has now expired. Commission members are appointed by the mayor and the council for the purpose of reviewing land use applications. Tonight's meeting is limited to 4 zoning applications. For these items, the commission will act as an advisory board, and as such, will make recommendations to the city council for their final determination. Tonight's meeting is being held as a teleconference. The complete agenda and all supporting documents for each of the items to be dealt with this evening has been posted on the city's website and is available for public review. Sophia, let's start with your discussion about how this meeting will be conducted, and then we'll move to the legislative regular agenda.
Yes, thank you for that opportunity. My name is Sophia Nelson. I am the planning director. Just a few announcements for the meeting. First, if you are not speaking, both for commissioners and attendees, please mute your mic, please. This will help ensure that we have good sound quality. Second, during the public hearing portions of this meeting, we ask that if you are here to speak on an item, you have one of 2 ways to let us know that. One is to raise your hand using the raise the hand function on your Zoom toolbar. The second is to chat your name and the item that you are here to speak on. In the chat, I had placed a link to the agenda for your review. If you have any questions or run into any technical issues, please feel free to send me a chat directly, and I can help you on the background with this. And with that, Chair, that's all my announcements. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. That takes us to item B, and this is the start of the legislative regular agenda. And just for information purposes, since we have a lot of folks showing up, many of whom have not attended a meeting before, the way this process will proceed this evening is that as each item is its turn comes up, I'll announce that agenda item and the file number for that item being considered. This meeting is being recorded, so it's important that we identify what we are working on. Our second step is the city staff will begin by reading the caption for the item for the record, and then we'll make a presentation to the commission and the public. At the conclusion of the staff presentation, the commission will then have an opportunity to question staff regarding the item. After the commission has completed their questions for staff, the applicant will be given up to 5 minutes to make a presentation to the commission. The commission will then have an opportunity to ask questions of the applicant. At the conclusion of the applicant's presentation, we will then open the floor for public comments. When it's your turn to address the commission, please begin your comments by stating your name and address for the record. Depending upon the number of people that are here to speak on any particular item, if we have 20 or fewer that are here to address the commission on an item, then speakers will have up to 3 minutes to address the commission, unless someone is willing to transfer their time, in which case an individual speaker may have up to 6 minutes to address the commission. Specifically on item E, since there are a number of people that have signed letters and are may be attending, before that agenda item begins, I'm going to identify how many people would like to speak. Rules that the city has adopted. If we have more than 20 people who want to address the commission, then we will have a minimum of 2 minutes per person to address, for you to make your comments. You can have another person donate their time to you, so you'd have up to 4 minutes to address the commission. After everyone who has signed up or has indicated a willingness to address the commission has spoken, the public hearing will be closed. The applicant will be provided up to 3 minutes of rebuttal time to respond to the public comments only if they so choose. Finally, the discussion of the item moves to the dais, and the commissioners will engage in the deliberative process with the goal of adopting a formal action on the item. That being said, we'll move to item B, and this is item number 2020-30-REZ. And this is a continuation of an item from the February 16th, 2021 regular meeting. Ethan, I think it's yours, please, sir.
Excuse me, Chair, just a quick announcement. You have had some P&Z members join the meeting.
Okay.
We do have Marlene McMichael, Travis Perthius, I believe is here, and Jay Warren are now all logged in.
Okay. So I brought Alex to the dais. Does he need to stay, or does that pull him off?
That pulls him off.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you. Alex, you got that? All right.
As I hit the marker. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Okay, Ethan, welcome. Good evening. And if you're talking, we cannot hear you.
There we go. Item B tonight is going to be on a request to rezone approximately 1.5 acres on North Austin Avenue from the industrial zoning district to the general commercial C3 district. The property is located directly across the street from Georgetown High School, in that corridor between the future Northwest Boulevard Bridge and the intersection of Interloop and Austin Avenue. This currently sits on property sits on a block full of all different types of uses. On the same block, we have retail uses, everything from some restaurants to retail stores. We have auto repair uses. We have self-storage uses, and even a preschool. directly across the street, you'll see the high school. Behind the high school, you'll see the Parkview Estates neighborhood. And then if you look up to the north end of the corridor, to the right, that's where we have our future Costco site. And 3 multifamily complexes are working their way through the development process there along Stadium Drive and Interloop. So this corridor, while itself is not growing, it is an important corridor for the city. Oh, my goodness. There we go. One of the reasons this is an important corridor for the city is because it sits along one of our regional center future land use areas. These two areas, the intersection of Interloop Lakeway, I-35 near the future Costco, and then this corridor here along I-35, they're at the very core of the city. So that is why they have that regional center designation we'll talk more about in just a second. If you look at the property, if you look at this kind of corridor, you really see a mixture of uses. Looking into the property, the triangular shaped block that it sits on was really created back in the 60s when I-35 was built through the city and bisected Airport Road. When it was annexed back in the 1970s, the bottom half of the south half or the left of the block was given a commercial designation, and the north half of the block was given an industrial designation. Over time, we have seen this block slowly rezoned to general commercial C3, one of which was for the preschool right there at the very corner, which we considered just last year. So when we talk about going from a industrial zoning district to the C3 zoning district, this will not affect our future land use ratios at all. We are going to remain right there at that 53–54% commercial area. A lot of the area you see in this regional center is technically zoned residential, but was most likely applied back before we had ag as our default zoning for annexation. So you can kind of most likely consider that as kind of being in a holding category. A regional center, like I mentioned, this is really where the city, where our future land use map promotes high intensity, commercial development that not only serves the neighborhood it's near, in and around, but also serves the entire city and maybe even the region. So for this reason, you can see these regional centers around major roadways because most of their uses are going to be very automobile oriented and they're heavy traffic generators. Our most common zoning district that we see in that regional center is the C3. When you look at it, its dimensional standards allow for a little bit larger in scale of a building, and its permitted uses are really just a laundry list of things that you would expect to find in a shopping center or some other retail-oriented space. And we have everything from every type of retail-oriented use you can imagine, personal services like hair salons, dance studios, offices, medical offices, some things like fuel sales or larger uses, education-related uses are allowed with some limitations. And then there are some typically more manufacturing or warehousing oriented uses that can be appropriate in the C3 with a special use permit to allow it to be context specific. You'll see that this is really different than what would currently be allowed on the property today in the industrial zoning district. So in this industrial zoning, you see we don't have any retail-oriented uses. If any, some of the medical office uses may get you there, but really you're focused on things with outdoor storage, warehousing, and manufacturing uses associated with it. So we looked at several different things. Looked at our 5 approval criteria for this rezoning. Number 1, we found we had a complete application. Number 2, we found that this change was consistent with the comprehensive plan. And really these 4 specific policies. Number 1, this C3 zoning would encourage a mix of uses here on this block in this regional center that the industrial district does not. The industrial district may be more appropriate in our employment center uses, even though it still does provide some services, but this regional center really expands that use of what could be done here. Our second bullet point, the future land use plan does identify North Austin Avenue as one of the corridors and target areas where we should be encouraging redevelopment and focusing on infill. Like I mentioned, there's a lot of that space here in this regional center that is not yet fully entitled. Our fifth land use policy, number 5, really talks about identifying opportunities within the city to promote infill development and redevelopment, just like this would. The applicant doesn't have any plans at this time to redevelop the site. However, allowing this broader list of uses promotes further use of that property. And again, Austin Avenue is one of our image corridors. And so we want to be conscious of the uses we're allowing here, and making that change to C3 does allow for a little bit more friendly use directly across the street from the high school. We did find that the zoning protects the public health, safety, and welfare because it was very similar to the properties around it. Most of those properties around it either had that industrial zoning with a use that would also be permitted in the C3 district, or they were already zoned C3. And so this would really just allow that orderly redevelopment of that property as of this block as those industrial sites are zoned commercial further on. The proposed zoning is of course compatible with everything around it. It's even compatible with the uses that the applicant already has in their tenant spaces. And lastly, there's nothing on this property that would prevent it from being redeveloped in the future to the full extent that the C3 district allows. There are no natural features or trees. They would still be able to have a driveway off the side street in the future, but nothing very substantial that would prevent redevelopment. So we did go through all of our typical public notification processes with our 300-foot buffer and our publication in the newspaper, and we did receive one written comment in favor that was included in your application packet. So this is a public hearing and possible action on a request to rezone approximately 1.46 acres from the industrial zoning district to the general commercial zoning district.
Okay, thank you, Ethan. Commissioners, any questions for staff?
And the applicant is here as well. If you have any questions for them.
Just a second. Let me see if I have questions from commissioners.
I was just rebooting your computer.
Okay. Let me ask folks to please check the mute buttons on their screen. Thank you. Okay. If no questions for staff from the commission, is the applicant is here and would like to make a statement. This is your opportunity.
No problem. My name is John Caldwell, and I think Ethan did a fantastic. Or can you hear me, sir?
Absolutely. Welcome.
Thank you. I really don't have anything more to say. I think Ethan helped me work through the process, and I mean, from my perspective, it seems sort of a no-brainer to allow this, as it's really what the city would want, as opposed to if I were to use it for the industrial uses as it's currently zoned. I don't know if you really would want that in that area, you know? So I think you did a great job of relaying our intentions, and that's it, unless you have questions for me.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, any questions for the applicant?
No questions, Ursula.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Ursula. I said I had no questions.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay. If that's the case, then I'm going to open the public hearing. Sophia, do we have anybody who's raised a hand would like to address the commission on this item?
No, sir, I do not see any hands raised, and I do not see anybody requesting to speak via chat.
Okay, thank you. Then I'm going to close the public hearing, and commissioners, as to this item, what is your recommendation to the city council?
Ursula, this is Sheree. I'd like to put forth a motion to approve the amendment as put forth.
Okay, so I have a motion to approve the zoning request as submitted. Do I have a second?
Ursula is Jay. I'll second.
All right, commissioners, any discussion, any questions or comments on that item? All right, Myrna, call the roll, please.
Sheree Heinzman,
Yes.
Marlene McMichael,
Yes.
I'm sorry, is Travis Perthius on the dais also?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, thank you. Jay Warren,
Yes.
Ursula Brashear,
Yes.
Jim Sawyer.
Was McCully who got was our full commissioner?
Mr. Sawyer?
He is.
Yeah, I'm here. I thought I was an alternate today.
I thought Jerry McCully was had been, but y'all square that away for me. Who's been appointed to the board, Jim or Jerry?
Let's see. Jim, I believe, was appointed a couple of weeks ago.
Okay, all right. Okay, so Jim, we need you to vote.
Yes.
All right, so that motion carries 6-0. Thank you very much. We appreciate that. Takes us to item C. This is going to be file number 2020-34-REZ, and Ethan, this is you again.
Yes, sir. Let me get set up here. There we go. All right. Item C is a request to rezone approximately 11.5 acres along Airport Road from the Ag zoning district, agriculture district to the industrial zoning district. This property is located directly across the street from the Georgetown Airport, just north of the little industrial park on Halmar Cove and the future extension of Aviation Drive. Within that little industrial park around Halmar Cove, you have some warehousing and manufacturing uses. Obviously, in the airport, you have offices, hangars, a few restaurants. To the north up Airport Road, you do have some single-family neighborhoods out in the ETJ. Then to the south, you have the intersection of Lakeway and Airport Road, which was recently improved by the city. Those improvements stopped just short of this property at Aviation Drive. To Airport Road in front of this property is still a 2-lane road. Aviation Drive is a project that is under development to extend that road as a minor arterial from Airport Road to the intersection of I-35 and the toll road. So Aviation Drive will actually split, and then when it crosses the highway, it will turn into the service roads for the toll road. Yes. So this property sits within one of our employment center designations. And when we compare the when we compare this conceptual employment center bubble to property boundaries and known entitlements, known projects, we can kind of realize that it's taken this strange angular shape here. So the yellow line running through the property, that is that minor arterial Aviation Drive that I spoke of. And then the blue dashed line going north from that, that is a future major collector road. So when we look at the zoning map, you can see that most of the property within this area is already zoned and entitled with that industrial designation, except for a small portion of ag property here along I-35, and then the remainder of a old PUD called the Three Forks PUD here to the north of the subject property. This gives us a land use ratio that is about 74% non-residential and about 26% unentitled. There are no residential entitlements within this area. The employment center does have that 80-20 split established in it. And somewhat like I mentioned on the rezoning before this, that employment center is meant to kind of centralize large employment businesses. Things like manufacturing, warehousing, large office or business parks. The employment center is really there to facilitate those spaces. As secondary use to those major employers, you can expect to have retail uses like shops, some restaurants, gas stations, those smaller commercial uses that would serve the folks that are working there in those businesses. But you can also expect to find some high density residential there to place homes adjacent to places of work. And that is one of our goals for the employment center in the 2030 plan. The industrial district, like I mentioned before, is really the district to facilitate that. When you look at this list of uses, you find things that are appropriate within business parks, things that do require lots of heavy truck traffic or automobile traffic. And so the industrial district really facilitates the goals of the employment center well. When we look at the approval criteria, number one, we do have a complete application. We did find that it is consistent with the comprehensive plan, and we do find that it promotes the health, safety, and welfare. It continues that orderly, industrial development that you're already seeing in the area. However, something to mention, it goes back to our land use ratios. If this project was approved, it would bump our non-residential entitlements up 4% to 78%, right below our 80% entitlement rate. 80% goal for non-residential, leaving the remainder of our properties to theoretically be residential in the future. However, just something interesting to note is that when we look at the properties within this employment center area, these are not necessarily properties that may be suitable for residential uses in the future. And so it's just worth noting now, and we feel this project complies, but it's worth noting that in the future, you may see requests that would take this employment center area over that 80% goal and force the residential that may be coming to support these employment center uses into the future land use areas around this employment center, up into that mixed-density neighborhood area, or most likely along I-35 and 130 in those regional center areas across the street. Our last two approval criteria is, of course, compatibility with the existing zoning in the area. Of course, it does comply. It's the same zoning. And then, of course, the suitability of the property. There are some trees located on the property, but nothing that would prohibit development of a use like you typically expect to see here. We did receive one comment in favor after going through our public notification process. Then, of course, tonight we're asking you to hold a public hearing and make a recommendation to the council to rezone approximately 11.5 acres from the ag zoning district to the industrial zoning district.
Okay, thank you, Ethan. Commissioners, any questions to Ethan on this item? All right, is the applicant present? Does the applicant want to address the commission? All right, not seeing or hearing any response, and this is a public hearing, so I'm going to open the public hearing.
Mr. Chairman, I think the applicant was just trying to get their mic on.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, let me back up then. I have not opened the public hearing. All right, so is the applicant is here?
Yes, we're here.
Okay.
This is Hollis Scheffler with Pacheco Coke.
Okay. Do you have any any comments or that you want to add to staff comments this evening?
No, I think Ethan summarized it pretty well.
Okay. All right. Then thank you very much. And thanks for attending this evening.
Thank you.
At this time, I'm going to open the public hearing. Are there any members of the public that are here that would like to speak to this matter? You can use the raise your hand function on the screen, or use the chat feature to notify staff that you'd like to address this item. Sophia, do you have anyone who has indicated a willingness to or an interest in speaking on this item?
No, sir.
Okay. Then I'm going to close the public hearing, and commissioners, as to this item, what is your recommendation to the city council?
Ursula is Jay. I recommend approval as presented by staff.
Okay, thank you. I have a motion by Commissioner Warren to recommend approval. Do I have a second?
It's Marlene, I'll second.
Okay, thank you, Marlene. Any discussion? Any questions or discussion? Okay, Myrna, call the roll, please.
Sheree Heinzman,
Yes.
Marlene McMichael, Marlene,
Sorry, yes.
thank you. Travis Berthius,
Yes.
Jay Warren,
Yes, ma'am.
Jim Sawyer,
Yes.
Ursula Brashear.
Yes, and so that motion carries 6-0. Thank you. That takes us to item D. This is item 2020-10-PUD, and this is a continuation from the February 16th, 2021 regular meeting. Andreana, good evening. Welcome.
Good evening, sorry, good evening, Commission. Yes, so the item that's before you tonight is another zoning map amendment request to rezone approximately just a little bit under 86 acres from the agriculture zoning district to the plain unit development district with a base district of business park. And this is for a property that's generally located just south of the intersection of the IH-35 in the State Highway 130 toll interchange, which you can see here on the screen in front of you highlighted in red. You may recall this property. We actually had the Planning and Zoning Commission previously considered back in November a rezoning request of this property where before they were asking for an industrial zoning district along the majority of the southern portion of the property, and then with a C3 general commercial zoning district along the I-35 frontage road. And so following that Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, the applicant decided to withdraw the request and revise it and come back with to you for consideration of a plain unit development district with, as mentioned, with the base district of business park to really fully better communicate and articulate the type of development and the project that's being proposed for this property. And so as you can see here, the property is currently vacant and it is surrounded primarily by large tracts of land that are undeveloped. You may also see here that to the south, there is an established single family residential neighborhood. Then to the west, you have an established industrial park. You also have the a commercial vehicle sales, fuel sales types of the use across I-35. You can see here where you have the whole cat development. You have the Titan, another warehousing distribution development that's currently under construction. And then as we move to the north and to the northeast, you also see here that there's definitely some additional large tracts of land that have remained undeveloped right now, with the exception of this small tract, which is actually also currently being developed for warehousing and contracting services types of development. And so I'm going here a little bit out of order tonight for purposes of this conversation, but as you can see here on the zoning map, as mentioned, this property is currently zoned agriculture, and a lot of the majority of those large undeveloped tracts of land that surround this property are also zoned agriculture, which is a zoning district that was established at the time when all of this area was annexed into the city as being the default initial zoning district. However, as you can see here, where there has been some development and entitlement process, we have some nearby industrial zoning district, particularly for that industrial park, existing industrial park. as well as some general commercial zoning district that has been entitled and designated for a lot of these properties that have gone through the entitlement process, are currently underdeveloped, particularly around the I-35 frontage road. And so when we look at the future land use map, you may recall this from seeing just the previous zoning map amendment request, but this area here, just south of that interchange, has been designated for regional center. And you can see here that a lot of those properties just south of that interchange, in particularly at this intersection of Lakeway and I-35, include that regional center designation. And then you have some also designation of employment center to both to the east and to the west to really be able to particularly accommodate all the industrial and business park related type of development that we're seeing between the I-35 and the Georgetown Municipal Airport. And then further to the north, some additional regional center categories to again further encourage and be able to develop or see some of that commercial, high intensity commercial development types of uses. And so when we were looking at this particular request here, you can kind of see the general area as we were looking into to be able to measure and count and analyze not only the character of the area, but also the permitted and the envisioned uses, as well as the targeted ratio when looking into how we are getting closer to accomplish that target ratio of 25% to 75% that is envisioned for the regional center category. And so as you learned from the first rezoning case, the regional center category, again, it's really that area to be able to accommodate for large commercial types of development. Yes, it can include your traditional large retail big box stores, but it can also include other highly intense commercial development that can be some services uses, some office uses, as well as hotels and other types of commercial development. But it also encourages from some of those supporting uses such as your smaller retailers and including some residential uses. And so when we look back here and looking at the zoning district, as I mentioned, there's a lot of agriculture zoning district that is included within this larger area. You can see here that the existing ratio that we have for this regional center designation is 26% non-residential. So all of these areas that were zoned general commercial, that are zoned industrial fall within that 26% of non-residential targeted ratio. And then all that agriculture, undeveloped, unentitled land fall within the 68% targeted ratio of what's currently existing within this area. And so we're tonight to consider a planned unit development. And as you may recall, our planned unit development zoning district is a special purpose zoning district because it allows a developer, it allows the property owner to really be able to draft their own development standards associated with that zoning district to be able to accommodate their project because the project may not be able to be developed under any other zoning district that's in our code. And so due to the conditions of the site or the conditions of the project itself, the special uses that may be proposed, they're able to incorporate some of those additional design standards, zoning standards to allow for the development of that particular project. And so in this particular case, the 85 acres are being proposed to be split within the PUD into 3 development zones, if you will. First is Zone A, which we are calling it the general commercial zone. And this one contains approximately just a little bit over 11 acres. And it includes the area along the frontage roads of both I-35 and the 130 tollway. And so these particular zones, as they're described in the PUD, is really primarily to be able to accommodate for some of those general commercial and service uses that are envisioned by the comprehensive plan, but also be able to allow some supporting industrial uses that are needed and that are unique to the overall project. The next zone that we have is Zone B, which is the center of the property, and this is your biggest area. And this is really your business park industrial zone. It includes just a little bit under 67 acres, but here's where all of those industrial uses, those business park uses, and included some supporting commercial uses it's where it's primarily going to be located and be able to be incorporated within that middle portion of the site. And then your third zone is what we're calling the use restricted zone. It includes approximately just a little bit over 7 acres, but it's really the south 200 feet of that property where it abuts that residential single family neighborhood. And so within this 200-foot area, no uses may be permitted at all. The zone describes that you can have certain site features like parking, vehicle parking, or it may be able to accommodate detention and other stormwater facilities. But in regards to uses themselves, buildings that are going to be occupied by any particular type of use, it would not be permitted within that 200-foot area. And so if we look at here within Zone A, talking about the general commercial zone, here are some of those uses that have been described in the PUD to be permitted by right, to be permitted with limitation, and some of those uses that would be may be permitted with a special use permit. This is really in line with our C3 general commercial zoning districts that we have. And so certain uses like your hotels, food catering services, medical clinics, small engine repair, all of those types of uses that are permitted by right within the general commercial today may also be allowed. However, the PUD does incorporate some additional uses with limitations into this category that would not be allowed by the general commercial C3 zoning districts today. So uses such as the wholesale showroom, a dry cleaning plant, limited manufacturing and processing, those are types of uses that would typically either require a special use permit in the C3 category, or that would just not be permitted in that category. These uses as part of the PUD process that you see here in the red box have been incorporated into the PUD to be able to be allowed with limitations, meaning that they can only be permitted provided that they meet additional site design standards in order to be able to mitigate the impact of that use, or that they would actually have to come in and request a special use permit to both the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council before that use may be developed within that zone. In addition to this, they did remove some uses to be allowed in this category. So uses such as any residential uses, motel, correctional facility, and so forth, these uses will not be permitted within that zone at all. Within the Zone B, which is that business industrial park zone, as mentioned, these are some of the uses that are permitted by right with limitations or through a special use permit. And this is really more in line with our industrial zoning district. So uses such as food catering services, data center, furniture repair and upholstery, those are types of uses that are permitted by right in the industrial category today, and that within the PUD, it would be permitted as well. Likewise, with the Zone A, they did incorporate some additional uses that are not allowed in the industrial zoning district category today, but that because of the uniqueness of this project, they would be allowed within the Zone B portion of it as part of this planned unit development. And uses such as religious assembly, hotel uses, a bar, tavern, or pub, or a microbrewery, as an example, those are uses that may be permitted within the Zone B area, provided, again, with limitations, meaning provided that they meet additional site design standards and some additional site requirements, they would be able to accommodate those uses within that Zone B. Likewise, there have been some uses that are permitted in the industrial zoning district that have been removed. And so uses like animal shelter, a firing range, pest control, fuel sales, recycling collection services, asphalt or concrete batch plant, those are all uses that while the industrial zoning district would allow them today, because of the PUD and the way that it's drafted, these uses would not be permitted at all on that property. In addition to the uses describing within Zones A and Zone B, the PUD also includes some additional building design standards, particularly for those buildings located within Zone A, to really be able to ensure that we maintain a commercial view and character type of development along our frontage roads. You know, with the regional center being a land use category that really envisions high commercial type of development, but also I-35 and the State Highway 130 toll being two gateways where there's a lot of recommendations and characters in our comprehensive plan to be able to really emphasize those gateway corridors as commercial corridors. Additional building design standards have been included into the PUD to ensure that even those uses that are being proposed that are more industrial in nature, that they may be located in there, provided that the built environment is very similar to one of a commercial type of a development. And so some additional building design standards that have been incorporated include location and emphasis on the primary entrance, depending on where the building is going to be located. So ensuring that that primary entrance faces a roadway, faces a primary drive or entrance into the property. Also including architectural elements to really be able to emphasize and focus on those primary and secondary entries. So our UDC today just requires standard architectural standards throughout the entire building. And so this one will definitely incorporate some additional design standards to those entryways to really be able to emphasize and hone in on the entries to the building. And then be able to include some different articulation requirements to those buildings in order to be able to really break that mass and the scale of the buildings themselves. In addition to that, where a use within Zone A may include warehouse or storage space, or it may include some type of a manufacturing, is that manufacturing, that storage portion be only limited to up to 33% of the front elevation. This would allow for any storage and manufacturing to be located towards the back of the building and be able to really emphasize on your lobby, your offices, your service areas to be towards the front of the building. However, the PUD does include an option in there that should an end user wish to go beyond that 33%, they can ask for an administrative exception from the planning director to allow that. In addition to that, the PUD also includes some enhanced landscape standards, particularly along the south property line where it does abut that residential single family development. And so our UDC today requires them to have a minimum of 30-foot wide high level buffer yard along that area. And so the PUD includes that standard, but it also includes enhanced standards in the sense of that any required trees will be required to be evergreen trees. And they also have to have a minimum size at the time of planting, but also when it gets to mature. And then we did provide in there the option that that masonry wall that would be required may be replaced by a 6-foot tall berm, because as part of the PUD's landscaping requirements is that they actually have a much wider landscaping area when you take into account the existing trees that exist along the south property line, and then the area that's being reserved for that 30-foot landscape buffer area, inclusive of the berm. And then you have the stormwater facilities, and then you have the parking lot area. And so all of that may be accommodated to accomplish within that 200-foot area of that restricted use space, and really be able to provide that as both as a buffer, but also mitigate the impact that any uses may have on the adjacent residential zoning districts to the south. And so in addition to that, we've included in the PUD limitations and screening requirements for any outdoor storage, to inclusive of the loading docks for those buildings from the adjacent property, as well as enhanced design standards of the stormwater ponds to include concrete trickle channels in order to really be able to mitigate and address some of the drainage issues that are seen, particularly along that southern portion of the property, and that have also been affected the residential neighborhood. And so staff reviewed this request based on the approval criteria for a zoning map amendment, as well as a planned unit development district. And for a zoning map amendment, we found that we had a complete application to be able to complete a review and analysis, and therefore we found that it complies. We found that the request does partially comply with a comprehensive plan. The reason why we said that it partially complies is because the regional center, as mentioned earlier, is an area that's really primarily focused and envisioned to accommodate large commercial types of development. And while this PUD does include commercial uses, it does also restrict those areas along I-35 and State Highway 130 for commercial development primarily. And it includes building design standards to ensure that that commercial look and feel is be able to be maintained. The majority of this property, over 66 acres of that property, is primarily envisioned to be for industrial types of uses. And so when you take the industrial uses that are being proposed on this property, plus the industrial uses that are already existing and entitled within that overall area, we find that it would create a lot more industrial uses than what is envisioned within that regional center area. And this may potentially end up resulting in the need for a future amendment to the future land use to be able to accommodate that change in development pattern. However, as mentioned, when we were looking at this area, there's a lot of that agriculture, unentitled type of land. that you see within here that it remains outstanding where it can be developed potentially with more commercial uses that are more in line with that regional center area. However, when we also look at the target ratio, very similar to the zoning map amendment request that you just heard previously, this is another situation where, and that's also in close proximity, that should it be approved, it's going to get us closer to meeting that targeted ratio of 75% non-residential. As you can see, we will go from 68% of having unentitled property to now 27% of unentitled property because your non-residential targeted area would increase to 68%. And so when we look at this area, we take a step back, we go a little bit above and look at it more regionally. You can see here the subject property within this regional center category node. You can see where it's getting that 68% of non-residential and remaining 20% of agricultural land. The remaining agricultural land being right here at the intersection of I-35 and 130, or along this tract of land of 130 right here, which again, based on the development pattern that we're seeing, there's the opportunity to be able to develop it for further commercial development, or potentially even should the site features accommodated some of that supporting residential development. Or another area may be this tiny triangle piece right here that's already now surrounded by some general commercial zoning category. And so as we take it further look back and looking at everything else, we look at the regional center category on the other side of I-35, and we see here that some of it is already zoned commercial, almost half of it. There's a bit of agriculture land right here that may be also developed for more commercial development. You recall from Ethan's case on the employment center category within this area where we're also getting close to that threshold of the 80% that's envisioned for non-residential development. You see further than to the north, as we kind of like start going clockwise, you see that regional center category to the top, where right now, because of the agriculture zoning district that exists out there, it's really more 100% agriculture unentitled land. However, some of these properties are currently being used for non-residential uses, and we foresee that that may continue to be able to develop for some non-residential. And then lastly, you see this employment center category on the other side of 130 to the east, where that's where you have the majority of that, large tracts of lands that are undeveloped, that are currently remain unentitled with the exception of one small property right here, where, as Ethan was mentioning in the previous case, we may be able to see that as these properties further develop, that supporting residential uses category may actually be more towards the outer area region of these adjoining land use categories as opposed to within the categories where we have them themselves. And so likewise, this is just something as we're getting closer to the threshold, it's something just to keep in mind and to be able to make of note. But this category, that's also based on what's being proposed. It complies with several of our land use policies, including encouraging a balance of uses and transition of uses because of how the PUD is laid out and proposed, not only on the permitted uses, but also on that transition of uses, going from commercial to industrial to having a use restricted zone to really be able to protect the residential uses further to the south. In addition, it also strengthens Georgetown's image and quality feel along the gateways by really not only proposing those commercial zones along the I-35 and State Highway 130 toll roadways, but also by including architectural standards to ensure that that gateway is preserved. But also because of the uses that are being proposed as part of this PUD, it does support Georgetown's target industries, including manufacturing, life sciences, and professional services that have been identified in the target industry analysis. In addition to that, looking at the rest of the criteria, we found that the zoning change promotes the health, safety, and general welfare of the city, as well as a safe, orderly, and healthful development, particularly because of the way that the PUD is laid out with having the different zones and having the different transition zones. We found that this criteria was met. Also, because of the adjacent industrial and general commercial zoning district that are abutting this property, as well as what's envisioned for this area with those large tracts of lands, we found that it's compatible with the nearby properties and character of this area. And the property, due to its size, with the development standards that are being proposed as part of the PUD, it is suitable for all the uses that are being permitted in this PUD district. When we look at the plant unit development approval criteria, we found that it complied with some of those criteria. Particularly, we found that this PUD does provide for employment opportunities as well as commercial services. As mentioned, the PUD includes 3 different zones, 2 of which allow for both a mix of commercial and industrial uses, where one is more as a higher emphasis on commercial, the other is an emphasis on industrial uses, and therefore we found that it complies with this criteria. We also found that it does provide an orderly and creative arrangements of land uses with respect to each other. As mentioned, by having the different types of zones and be able to incorporate some of those building and site design standards to provide for that transition of uses, the uses have been accommodated in such a way that not only they can work cohesively within a unified project, but it also takes into account and protects against the adjacent uses and properties that surround this property. We found that it did not comply with providing an integrated comprehensive transportation system, and that's because no standards to be able to include additional street, pedestrian, or bicycle facilities were included as part of the PUD. So in this case, we found that it did not comply. And we also found that it did not comply with the criteria of providing recreational facilities because none were included as part of the PUD standards. We found that it partially complied with the location of the general building envelopes. And the reason why we found that it partially complied with this criteria is because while the PUD did not include location of specific buildings, there's really not a determination at this point as to whether this development would be a single building or it would be a combination of multiple buildings of different sizes and so forth. There's really not an ability or opportunity to be able to work through where those buildings specifically are going to be located in terms of the site. However, we found that it did comply in that the PUD includes standards, both site and building design standards, to be able to make sure that we take into account the adjacent properties so that we are not only able to protect them against the uses that are being proposed in this PUD, but that it also doesn't give their back to those adjacent properties. And so by providing proper screening, architectural standards, it provides for that transition and easy flow of development to the adjacent property. And then lastly, we found that it did comply with the staging of the development as this property is, any regional facilities that are being proposed for the entire development, such as an example, that stormwater facility along the south property line that will serve the entire property will be done and accommodated within the first phase of the development. And so as required by our UDC, 90 property owners were notified of the PUD request, as well as notices put on the newspaper and on the site. And today staff has received no written comments on this request. And so in summary, this is a public hearing and possible action on a request for a zoning map amendment to rezone approximately 85.734 acres from the agriculture zoning district to the plant unit development district with a base district of business park. And I'll be happy to answer any questions. And I believe the applicant is also present to be able to address the commission.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, do you have questions regarding the staff's presentation on this item? Andrea, would you please go back to the PUD allowable uses and take me to the section A, I believe, zone B. Go to zone A. All right. All right. In the general commercial category, one of the advantages of the PUD from the city's perspective, as I understand it, is that you're able to secure enhancements to those items that are allowable under existing UDC requirements. Tell me what's enhanced in zone A.
So in zone A, in terms of uses that would be permitted, in zone A, the enhancements are going to be these additional uses that are currently not allowed in the C3 category or that are not allowed by right, either they're not allowed at all or are not allowed by right. And so this PUD includes those additional uses to be able to be permitted and to be able to be developed within those zone areas, provided that some additional site design standards such as like building articulation, as mentioned, the placement of those entryways, the limitation of the storage or the manufacturing use along the front building facade, provided that those additional standards are actually met. And so if they are, then those uses would be permitted there, these are uses that you would not see in a C3 zoning district today.
So those, that category of items permitted with an SUP, if this were not part of a PUD, would the heavy equipment sales and repair be allowed within the general commercial classification?
No, so the heavy equipment sales and repair today, it requires an SUP, and that remains the same.
I'm sorry, say it requires what?
It requires a special use permit, and that will remain the same.
Regardless of zoning classification?
In the general commercial zoning district, it would.
Okay.
However, the use, for example, like the general manufacturing use, that one is not allowed in the C3 category at all.
So I'm curious why the heavy equipment sales and repair box was highlighted in red.
Because actually, I think I need to go back because I may be confusing the uses. Hang on one second. Give me 1 second. I think I'm confusing this with the commercial vehicle sales.
Okay.
And I need to correct myself. Hang on.
So the correction is what?
So the correction is,
you have
the correction is that it's not allowed.
Right.
Yes, I was confusing the use, so I apologize for that. Heavy equipment sales and repair is not permitted in the C3 category at all.
But in this case, in this PUD, it could be.
Correct. In this case, it could be. Permit. Correct. Yes, sir.
Okay. And then what about the manufacturing, processing, and assembly? Isn't that the purpose of this entire PUD, is to encourage that kind of activity?
Yes, and so that use would remain being permitted within the middle portion of the site, but within Zone A, so along I-35 and the State Highway 130, that use may be permitted there subject to the special use permit. And the reason why it was the special use permit is so to be able to maintain the area along the frontage roads as commercially focused areas.
Okay. Let's go to Zone B, please. Permitted by right home health care services, tell me why that is included in permitted by right in the industrial park.
So as I understand it, working with the applicant, and the applicant may certainly respond better to this than I am, is that they're looking at a wide range of users.
So it's an applicant requested item?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Religious assembly facilities with columbarium, tell me what that represents.
So same thing. Those are types of uses that are typically not allowed within our industrial zoning district category. And it just opens it up and having the flexibility of being able to allow some of those additional uses within that industrial portion of the property.
And those typically be like a C3 requirement?
Correct.
So what we're doing is we're expanding the business industrial park options by including this. What in the limitations are only design limitations that are included in the PUD, nothing to do with entitlements. Okay. Go to the next item, please. Was there a Zone C?
There is a Zone
There is,
C.
but there's nothing on Zone C. Okay.
Correct.
So go back to your ratios, please. We have 7 acres of this that is essentially not, I mean, it can be used for detention facilities, or it's non-industrial related. It's I guess you said it could be used for parking lots?
Correct.
Okay. And I'm wondering if the 8 acres if were pulled out of the you know, if those were treated as more residential in character because they're very limited use, would that help you with your splits at all?
So they were not treated residential in character because they do not serve a residential use purpose, nor would they be able to be developed as a residential use. I mean, as mentioned, yes, there's no specific use that would be allowed within that area, but that area may be included of the drive outs and the parking lots and areas of all of those industrial uses. So it's more, that's what the reason why it was not included within that residential ratio category.
Okay.
However, to answer your question in regards to, you know, if we were to remove it, does it actually, would it help with the ratios at all? I think the 7 acres, with being such a small percentage, it doesn't impact the difference in the ratios very significantly.
Okay. And then finally, I want to go back to this, the last 3 items, or the last two of the last items on your PUD approval criteria, where we have do not comply. You have 1, 2, 3, 4 complies, 2 do not comply, and 1 partially complies. And yet your conclusion is that it's a relatively small amount of deviation from, I'm not sure I understand what the purpose of the PUD is, to negotiate the items that you need resolved. And wouldn't items 3 and 4 have been items that you would have addressed as a condition for granting the request for a PUD? Isn't that typically something a PUD process addresses?
Yes, in some certain circumstances, yes. I mean, because as mentioned, the PUD, by being that special purpose district, and really being able to encouraging a unique master plan type of community, it does incorporate some of these additional criteria that you would typically see in a plan unit development. However, in this particular case, we have a plan unit development that's primarily in a business industrial park that has some types of users and some really heavy loaded truck traffic, where some of these features that you would typically see in a PUD would not consider to be appropriate. So there are part of the criteria, which is the reason why staff found that it did not comply. However, the way that the PUD has been described and how this property would be developed, it doesn't necessarily accommodate for some of these additional features that you would see in a PUD. Did I answer your question?
You wandered around it again, but I think I understand how you got to where you got. So I appreciate that. Commissioners, anyone else have questions for staff at this point? All right, not seeing it. Is the applicant present, and would you like to address the commission?
Yes, please.
Okay, sir. Please give us your name and address, and you have 5 minutes, please.
Yes, sir. Sal Perdomo with Titan Development. Address is 6300 Riverside Plaza Lane, Northwest Suite 200, Albuquerque, New Mexico, 87120. And I have a few talking points prepared, but I'll jump off script a little bit to address some of the questions you had earlier.
Okay.
In your conversation with Andreina. So before I begin, I would like to thank Andreina, Sophia, and Michaela for their hard work getting us to this point. Really, the purpose of this discussion and my commentary is to provide some additional background on the past 3.5 months, and to elaborate on our collaboration with the city and more importantly, the Crystal Knoll Terrace neighborhood just adjacent to our site. We stood here before you on November 3rd of last year with a request to rezone from AG to IN and received a 3-3 vote. We ended up withdrawing our application that was headed to City Council and have now revised our request. After several months of collaboration with the city and neighborhood, we now have a zone change request that meets the needs of the city, the adjacent neighborhood, and most importantly, furthers the goals, objectives, and policies outlined in the Georgetown 2030 plan. As outlined in Andreina's presentation, our PUD development plan is primarily focused on 2 areas of the project. First is the Interstate 35 frontage. They're adjacent to Zone A. And second is the shared boundary with the Crystal Knoll Terrace neighborhood. As it relates to the Interstate 35 frontage, we understand this boundary is in essence a northern entry point for the city. And it is important to promote quality and respectful building design in this area. For this reason, we have worked diligently with the city to include additional design standards related to articulation, facade enhancements, landscaping, and use restrictions over and above what the zoning code would require. As it relates to your questions from earlier, there are a couple heavier uses that are included in that Zone A. We worked with the city in detail on those and decided to go forward with a SUP, a special use permit, so that the commission would have another opportunity to look at those uses. Additionally, there are significant limitations that apply to those heavier uses as it relates to outdoor storage, as it relates to articulation, landscaping, facade, those things that will make the presence off the frontage road really beautiful and really beautify that area. That was really important to us and really important for the city when we worked through this PUD. So moving on to the shared boundary with the Crystal Knoll Terrace neighborhood, through collaboration with the city, we created that 200-foot use restricted area that will appropriately buffer the subject property from the neighborhood. This area includes enhanced landscaping, ponding, and berming, and is planned to alleviate disruption of the residents and natural habitats in the area. So I'm going to go back and just talk about what the past 3 months, what we've done in detail. There's been significant collaboration and work between all of our teams, the planning department, economic development, and the neighborhood. And since November 3rd, we've accomplished the following. First, we amended the zone change request from an IN to a PUD. And many of the items in the table that state that they do not comply are simply not relevant to our site, such as providing a pedestrian network or cultural facilities. Those are not relevant. They're not appropriate for a business park. Having just as a side note, having a pedestrian network through an industrial park provides safety concerns. And so, we had those discussions, but it just isn't feasible for this area. So second, we had 7 formal meetings between city planning, city economic development, and our team, in addition to dozens of informal discussions related to the project. It is important to note that these meetings have included highly detailed conversations related to specific uses, design requirements, and the 200-foot use restricted area adjacent to the neighborhood. Third, since November 3rd, we've made 3 separate submittals to the city planning department, and both received and addressed feedback after each submittal. Lastly, and maybe more importantly, prior to our first submittal on December 2nd, we met with approximately 8 to 10 members of the neighborhood in the cul-de-sac near the north end of their neighborhood, and as well as representatives from the city. The purpose of that meeting was to discuss the project and hear concerns voiced by the members of the neighborhood. The feedback received from that neighborhood was the driving force behind the design, size, look and feel of the 200-foot use restricted area. Since December 2nd, we've had additional communication with the meeting attendees over letter and email, over and above what the standard notification requirements are by the city of Georgetown. And I would like to elaborate on a specific story related to one resident of the Crystal Knoll Terrace neighborhood. One of the neighbors that we've been working with and communicating with over the past few months lives directly adjacent to our property. And due to the current drainage conditions on the site and lack of proper engineering when the Crystal Knoll Terrace neighborhood was built, the subject property drains into 2 storm drain inlets. One of those inlets is located within the neighbor's backyard and is wholly insufficient for the amount of flows coming off our property. This insufficient design caused significant flooding through this neighbor's back and side yard, and sometimes flooding the entire yard. She showed us pictures, and there was almost a foot of water in her yard. And because of this issue, the neighbor underwent significant expenses to build a stem wall to try and re-divert flows in an effort to not flood their house. And this was unsuccessful. The flooding still occurred in her backyard. Our team met with this neighbor in their backyard to analyze the existing condition. And after reviewing this existing condition, we can confidently say that the design of the storm drain and ponding infrastructure on our site will alleviate the flooding in this neighbor's backyard and potentially allow them to utilize more of their yard going forward. I share this story with you because it is important to understand the amount of collaboration and work that has gone into creating a PUD that promotes mindful development that is respectful to the adjacent area and doesn't create problems, but in fact solves them, like we're doing with this neighbor. As mentioned, our team would like to thank Andrina and Sophia with City Planning, Michaela with City Economic Development for all their hard work that has gone into this process, and for allowing us to collaborate with them over the past 3 months to ensure that the project is of the utmost quality. We ask that you vote to advise City Council for approval of this project, and we're excited about the opportunity to bring quality jobs and services to Georgetown, Texas. Thank you for allowing me a few minutes to share these words. A few members of our team are on the call, and we can stand for any questions at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Mr. Perdomo. Commissioners, any questions for the applicant? All right, not hearing any, I'm going to open the public hearing. Is there anyone here this evening that would like to address the commission on this item? I see no raised hands on the Zoom board. Sophia, do you have anyone?
No, sir, there's no indication of a chat from anybody that would like to speak at this time.
Okay, thank you. With that, I will close the public hearing. And the commissioners, as to this item, excuse me, what is your recommendation to the city council?
Ursula is J. I recommend that we approve as presented by staff.
Okay, I have a motion by Commissioner Warren to approve as presented. Do I have a second?
This is Sheree. I'll second that motion.
Okay, so I have a motion and a second to approve the recommendation as presented. Do I have any discussion by any commissioners? If not, Myrna, would you call the roll, please?
Sheree Heinzman,
Yes.
Marlene McMichael,
Yes.
Travis Berthius,
I am not voting on this item. I filed a recusal form for this one.
Okay, I'm sorry. Didn't realize that, Travis. Okay.
Jay Warren,
Yes, ma'am.
Jim Sawyer,
Yes.
Ursula Brashear.
Yes, so the motion carries 5-4-0 against and 1 abstention with Commissioner Perthius. So that motion passes. Thank you very much. That takes us to item E, which is file number 2020-32-REZ. Michael Petrosky, good evening. Welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Good evening, everyone. Can everyone see my screen, the 903 Riverhaven Drive?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. This is a public hearing and possible action on a request for a zoning map amendment to rezone approximately 8.705 acres of land out of the Antonio Flores Survey, abstract number 235, from residential single family zoning district to high density multifamily MF2 zoning district for the property generally located at 903 Riverhaven Drive, 2020-32 REZ. This is a continuation, not just from the last week, but from January 19th, 2021, Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, where after hearing from the public comment, the applicant did request to postpone the item to a later date so that they could have a second meeting with the Parkview Estates HOA. So again, the property we are looking at is at the 903 Riverhaven Drive. We are located along 971, just to the south of the Parkview Estates subdivision and just to the north of San Gabriel Park. Seeing here, there are 2 separate future land use designations for this site, both community center in this pink area here to the east, and the mixed density neighborhood in the lighter brown color to the west. Looking at the first one, the mixed density neighborhood, this has a designated targeted ratio of 80% residential development with an intended dwelling units in acre of 5 to 14. And the primary use in this area is going to be the single family townhomes, detached duplex townhomes, etc. As well as some smaller civic uses as well. Looking at the community center node, this has a target ratio of 80% non-residential developments. And you're going to be seeing an intended dwelling units in acre of 14 or more. The primary uses here are small to mid-sized retailers, professional office service-oriented businesses, as well as some civic uses as well. Looking, scaling back a little bit, looking at the study area, you can see the property here. This subject property is part of a 125-acre community center node in the middle here, and then is also part of a roughly the same size, 124.5 mixed density neighborhood. As we've mentioned before in the past, when we have some of these larger swaths of the same future land use development, we try to limit the scope a little bit based on roadways, topographical features, maybe the floodplains, et cetera. So for this particular case, staff found that it would be appropriate to limit the area to everything to the north of 971 between North Austin Avenue and the Northeast Inner Loop. Looking at the community center node here in the middle, the intended ratio is, as we mentioned, is supposed to be 80% non-residential. However, as this property has developed, we are seeing that it has developed as 76% residential, so almost a complete opposite. This intersection has been developed with a mix of low to medium density residential that includes low density multifamily, as well as some public parkland. Looking at the mixed density neighborhood, we see here it has the 80% residential, and it's currently at the 18 with a large swath of it within the agricultural unentitled area. We should note that because we are going from one residential district to another, none of these ratios will be shifting at all. However, the mixed density neighborhood envisions a mix of residential uses ranging in types and density up to a maximum of 14 dwelling units an acre. And then again, having these secondary neighborhoods supporting commercial uses. Looking at this particular case, staff found that the use may be more, or I'm sorry, the subject property may be more appropriate to lie within the mixed density neighborhood. Part of that is because this is area 971 is part of the Scenic Image Corridor. Their appropriate uses along the Scenic Corridor include residential, commercial, and retail. The priority of these are to create a welcoming gateway that allows for a transition from rural to lower intensity development to areas that are more formally developed. This is done by prioritizing lower intensities along these scenic corridors and creating transition in uses and streetscaping. Due to all these factors, the community center node here, it seems that it may be more appropriate either closer to the North Austin Avenue intersection or the intersections along the Northeast Inner Loop. Looking at this map here, you can see that the subject property is zoned residential single family, as is the property to the east, and this one block directly to the north across 971. Also to the north, we have C1, which is a local commercial, and then we have the two family to the north as well. To the south, we have the PF, which is the public facility, that being the San Gabriel Park. Looking at the requested zoning district, we have the high density multifamily MF2. Generally, you see here is apartment and condominiums, maximum density of 24 units an acre, minimum lot size of 2 acres, and a maximum building height of 45 feet. See here, there is a short list of uses that are permitted by right within the MF2, as well as a second list here that may be permitted with certain limitations, and then a third very short list here that may be permitted after the approval of a special use permit. Looking at the approval criteria for a rezoning, staff found that 3 out of the 5 criteria comply, and 2 of them partially comply. To begin with, the application was deemed to be complete. For number 2, the zoning change is consistent with the comprehensive plan. Staff found that this partially complies. Excuse me. Land use policy 2 of the 2030 comprehensive plan aims to promote development of complete neighborhoods across Georgetown. Well-maintained and stable neighborhoods provide high quality of life for residents. New neighborhoods should include a variety of housing options and price points, and the access to neighboring service, commercial, recreational, and cultural amenities. Having such close access to the park just across River Haven Drive and being along 971, in this regard, the request is in compliance. However, it should be taken into consideration that the high density multifamily MF2 zoning district allows for a maximum density of 24 dwelling units an acre, while the mixed density neighborhood envisions a closer range of 5 to 14 dwelling units per acre. While the MF2 zoning district would permit higher density that is supported at the adjacent, a less intense zoning districts such as the low density multifamily MF1, which allows for a maximum dwelling unit per acre of 14, may be more appropriate. I've also highlighted the maximum height here, which we will circle back to in just one moment. The third criteria item, the subject property is suitable for all the uses under the proposed high density multifamily zoning district. In addition, the subject property is located along a major arterial and major collector level roadways that are suitable to accommodate the digital density. Number 4, staff found that the zoning change being compatible with the present zoning also partially complies. The MF2 zoning district would be compatible with the present zoning and conforming uses of the surrounding area. Georgetown State UDC states that MF2 development should have direct access to major thoroughfares and should not route traffic through lower density residential areas. In addition, the subject property is isolated due to the 3 roadways of 971 River Haven Drive and East Morrow Street. Therefore, that limits the likelihood of conflicting land uses. However, the subject property, as we mentioned before, is located within the Scenic Natural Gateway. This is intended to preserve rural, low intensity, natural environment that surrounds Georgetown. The 2030 comprehensive plan aims to provide a lower intensity development for this area to maintain the natural character. Therefore, the MF2 zoning district may be seen as too intense for this particular portion of 971. Furthermore, as we mentioned earlier, the MF2 zoning district allows for a maximum building height of 45 feet, while all of the other residential and non-residential developments surrounding the property, all of those zoning districts have a current maximum building height of 35 feet, so it would be 10 feet taller. And the last criteria item is complies. There is sufficient area to develop the site with any permitted uses within the MF2 and be in compliance with all the development standards. Within 25 property owners were contacted within 300 feet of the subject property. Notice was placed in the Sun newspaper. As of submitting this report, we had 1 written comment in favor, 117 in opposition. I believe since that time, I did receive a stack of 34 additional that were sent to you, I believe this morning. And then we had 1 additional come in very late at the end of the day here. So right now we are sitting at around 152 in total that you should have received. Per the UDC, the Planning and Zoning Commission shall hold a public hearing and make a recommendation to City Council. I am here to answer any questions you may have, and the applicant, Mr. Walsh, is here with us this evening, and he has a short PowerPoint presentation he would like to share with you as well.
Okay, commissioners, any questions or for Mr. Petrosky? All right, if not, then if the applicant would like to make a presentation, welcome. Please let us know who you are, and you have 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you so much. My name is David Walsh. I'm here on behalf of Graystar for this proposed rezoning request. Thank you, Michael, for the intro and for helping with this presentation or driving such. Next slide when you get a chance to reshare, please.
We can see that.
Next slide, please, Michael.
We got 90 people signed up.
Thank you. As a reminder, we were here last month, as Michael mentioned, and heard the concerns of the neighborhood. This is the proposed development that we were seeking to construct under MF2 zoning when we visited last month. An age-restricted 55+ community with a 4-story building on the east portion of the property and single-story cottages on the west side of the property. Next slide, please. After hearing the concerns of the neighborhood at last month's meeting, we reached out to Parkview Estates to set up a follow-up meeting, and that occurred on January 27th. And we started by confirming that we understood their concerns correctly to start from the right place. So those in summary were that 4 stories is too tall and will block their view of the park from their existing homes, that it will create an undesirable view when driving along 971. It will create additional traffic on 971 and through San Gabriel Park, and that pedestrian access from the neighborhood to San Gabriel Park is already challenging and dangerous. After confirming that we understood the concerns correctly, we started to present some design alternatives that we had come up with that would help mitigate these concerns. So the first of which was shifting the location of the main building behind the tall existing trees between our property and the cemetery, which we plan to preserve. That would hide most of the building. Next, we reviewed the Scenic gateway requirements as Michael laid out that would help create a pleasant aesthetic from street level and is specifically applied to this major arterial, which is 971 as outlined in the staff report. We requested feedback regarding project entry locations and how that would impact traffic flow in the neighborhood. We emphasized that we would be building sidewalks on all sides of this site for pedestrian safety, none of which exists today. And then finally, we also proposed that potentially we could work to build a landscaped public walkway that cuts through our site to San Gabriel Park for safe, beautiful access of all of the residents to the north of the site to San Gabriel Park. Next slide, please, Michael. During that meeting, we continued to get feedback from the neighborhood that 4 stories was too tall no matter where it was on the site, that landscaping won't hide the building. It absolutely won't, but it will create a nice aesthetic as designed in code for roads of this type, for prominent arterials and growth zones leading into the city, as 971 has been identified. We heard a new concern, a privacy concern, that residents of our development would have an unreasonable view of the residents of Parkview Estates. I'll address that one in a second. There was the concern that the plan that we show won't actually be what's developed if MF2 is approved. We're prepared that approval could be contingent upon executing a restrictive covenant that limits us to the height, density, and use that we're outlining tonight. We just need somebody to engage with us to make that happen. There was the concern that residents will drive through San Gabriel Park to go downtown. The end users of this site, whether it's residential or commercial use, will one day face only the exact same decisions that the residents of Parkview Estates make every day about how to get downtown. And finally, there was some mixed feedback about the public walkway through the site to the park. Some residents expressed that it didn't make a difference, and others said that it would be a real nice benefit to them and their families. After that meeting, obviously we had heard that 4 stories was still a big sticking point. We want to get support from Parkview Estates. That came up a number of times. Also last month, Commissioner Warren pointed out that he thought that this would more likely have success if we stuck to the currently allowed height under RS zoning of 35 feet or less. So we worked with our architect to come up with a land plan that kept us to 3 stories and within that 35 feet. I presented that land plan to the board of Parkview Estates and requested a meeting to explain this and some other benefits to the residents of the neighborhood. That request for a meeting was not accepted. And we were reminded, or they emphasized that they will not support any rezone that increases the density on this site. Next slide, please, Michael. This is the site plan that we are now proposing and have brought to Parkview Estates for discussion. This is a 3-story building the whole way around. We've also pulled it further off of 971 to exceed the requirements under the Scenic gateway. So that main building at the middle at the clubhouse is about 300 feet. So about a football field off of 971, big expansive green space before the building. On the west side, we are requesting MF2. This is just, we wanted to do a test fit and show that we could include commercial. If that is the desire of the commission and the city council, we would be willing to resubmit our zoning to include that commercial component and the appropriate zoning, as we've heard might be the desire in partnership with multifamily zoning going forward. So we're open to that feedback. Next slide, please, Michael. To the concern about privacy of the neighbors of Parkview Estates, the proposed building would be about 680 feet from that first row of homes along Rio Vista Drive. Next slide, please, Michael. 680 feet is more than 19 full-length school buses parked front to back. It's more than 2 football field lengths. that's not identified as a privacy concern by architects. Next slide, please, Michael. Some of the neighbors requested that we help them understand what could be developed by right under RS, as it's currently an abandoned single-family building that's not maximizing the current zoning, single-story building. This is how the site could be laid out with 3-story single-family homes under the 35-foot height restriction. This would be 63 3-bedroom homes, so 189 beds. Next slide, please, Michael. From a 3D perspective, you can see what this would look like on the site. Obviously, we would love to make the 55+ community happen here on this site. But if you take a look at this, I do believe that it is significantly more cluttered and less cooperative with all of the surrounding uses than our proposed concentrated 3-story building with the same height that's shown here. Next slide, please, Michael. So in summary, thank you again for having us back. We are trying to bring compromises to the neighborhood of Parkview Estates. We'd like to work together to transform this abandoned, boarded up property that's causing police calls right now into an asset to the community where current residents can continue to age in Georgetown. It's been expressed that Parkview Estates is not interested in engaging with us on a rezone, but we're here, we're ready to compromise and try to come up with a solution that's the right fit for this site. So with that, I'm joined by a couple of team members here today who collectively, we're happy to answer any questions. And we do request a favorable recommendation for MF2 zoning. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Walsh. Commissioners, any questions for the applicant?
So David, this is Commissioner Heitzman. Are you stating that you are still willing to work with the neighborhood to come up with further revisions or design to your current plan?
Yes, Commissioner, we are.
Okay, thank you.
So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay, and did you make that clear to the neighborhood that the revisions that you had presented was still open for feedback from the neighborhood?
Yes, ma'am, we did. In the email in which I included this update, I requested an opportunity to present these and gather further feedback for how this site plan could work together.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So let me address the question about the value of the negotiations between the parties. And one of the challenges, Mr. Walsh, that you have is, and this is just from my perspective, but the agreements or the deviations that you are willing to offer that are a variance with the maximum allowable activity under the zoning ordinance are things that are not codified in any way with the zoning application. The question before the city is either the MF2 zoning or nothing. And without a PUD application or some other mechanism to codify your willingness to say, we're going to drop this to 3 stories when the ordinance clearly allows you to go to 45 feet, that's a non-enforceable agreement on your part. And that is, how would you propose to, I guess, quell the uncertainty about your intentions or your ability to go back to the maximums allowed if MF2 zoning were granted?
Yes, sir. Absolutely. We understand that that would be a concern as expressed to this date. And to assure everybody that the intentions are true here, there is a legal process where we could enter into a private restrictive covenant with a third party, which could be Parkview Estates. which would require us, and in that we could really outline whatever we together decided, the 3 stories, the 172 units, the 55 plus age restriction. So we could legally be bound via a restrictive covenant that Parkview Estates could enforce.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions for the applicant? Okay. Before I open the public hearing, Sophia, I have, I've got almost 100, well, I've got 150 names on my list of people who've signed 1 or 2 form letters in objection to this application. Are we operating under the 20% rule on this application tonight?
Only if we have 20 or more speakers do we limit time to 2 minutes apiece, or 4 minutes if they're seating. Right now, I've had 2 speakers raise their hands, and I've had 1 identify that she would like to give her time to another speaker. So that's technically 4 speakers that I have signed up, and it looks like we have another hand raised.
Well, just a second. I'm not right now. I'm not focused on time. I'm focused on the vote of the commission.
Oh, please. Oh, I'm sorry. Please excuse me.
Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying. No, the 20% requirement, it only affects the council. It doesn't cause a supermajority of the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right. For members of the public that are here this evening and that would like to speak, if you would please use the raise your hand feature so we can get a count on how many folks are here to address the commission. And the reason I need the count is because we have 2 sets of rules for how long you get a chance to speak. So I have 4 hands raised right now. I'm sorry, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. All right. So I'm counting 9 hands raised.
Yes, sir.
10. All right. All right. Well, let's assume that that's indicative of what we have. Folks willing to address the commission or requesting to address the commission. Under that scenario, each speaker will be allowed up to 3 minutes to address the commission, and you do have the ability to donate your time to another party, so they have a total of 6. And I think Gina Watson has already donated her time. I think if I read that correctly, is that right?
Yes, sir. That's right.
Okay.
That is to go to Scott Strantz.
Scott Strantz. Okay. And Scott is here as the board president for Parkview Estates, and I think we will start with you, Scott. So we will have 6 minutes to address the commission, and please begin. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. First off, I'd like to say thank you to David and his team. Our meetings and our discussions were, in my opinion, professional and cordial. We just have a difference of opinion at this point. So I don't want there to be any feeling that there's animosity or something like that. We are just fundamentally opposed to a 4-story development at this point. We appreciate the time that was taken for the discussion, and we were pleased to see that they took this into account. But as president of the board, I stand with and behind the residents who have overwhelmingly voiced their concern about a 4-story project. So that's really where we're at regarding that. I think moving on, what we're really talking about is a tremendous number of open-ended questions regarding the project. What planning and zoning has before them is a difficult decision because there are certain guidelines that need to be reviewed, the check boxes that need to be looked at, and then an assessment or an evaluation needs to take place. And all of that at the moment is done based on primarily conceptual drawings, concepts. We are going to put a building here that looks generally like this, but there's a lot of questions around that. And I think changing a zoning for a piece of property based on so many unknowns in this particular case is not beneficial to the city or the residents of Parkview Estates. Specifically, the latest iteration shows a small commercial 2,000 square foot area on the west side. I don't know if that would again have to go through another zoning request, but a 2,000 square foot commercial component is about the size of one of our larger one-story homes in the neighborhood. It's not a significant piece when the commercial component of the corridor is lacking. Another component is the traffic circle. The diagram shows that their main entrance would now be basically in front of this traffic circle based on the last drawing that we had, and I don't think that's a realistic thing. So again, that's a question. Where would that actually be? When we look at their drawings, we don't see anything regarding the drainage pond. Another big question: where is that going to be? And then to the east, as we mentioned last time, there's still a question of that 1 acre, 0.66 acres being encumbered by the Parkview Estates subdivision. We are in possession of county documents that show that was required to be built, but it isn't addressed anywhere that I can see in the plans. When you look at a project such as this, the main feature, if you will, is the center court area, pool, etc. And if you look at the current diagram, that's facing the FM 971 corridor and our neighborhood, and then on the other side of 971, a commercial zoned area. I think if you look at apartment type projects, they want that to be the absolute best view, and I don't see how this would be an attractive thing. And I'm getting into design at this point, and it's not my decision to say how it's done, but I don't understand the process behind that. So what all of this really boils down to in my mind is that they've proposed a 3-story building now, but we understand they can do that by right. Now, it may be undeveloped at the moment, but we're just fundamentally opposed to the 4-story concept and changing this to a higher density zoning area. We have no assurances that the developer will continue with the project, and once that zoning designation is made, it's made. It would be a difficult thing to undo, in our opinion. I guess what we do know is that based on the spreadsheet of the ownership in the buffery, we've calculated based on that city provided spreadsheet that we have 19.92% of our 20%. So we are such a small portion shy of 20%, which could be survey errors. It could be, it's a small area. I mean, are we talking 100 square feet that makes us shy? I think that's something that P&Z needs to consider. What we also do know is 100% of our residents in that area are opposed. What we do know is that through our dialogue with the owner of the cemetery, there are cultural factors in play with their traditions, and this isn't an ideal solution to change the zoning to a higher density from their perspective as caretakers of this heritage cemetery. So all I ask at this point is weigh or consider all of the unknowns and compare that against what is known, and look at the potential downside to the vast majority, 150 plus people who have voiced opposition. We're so close to this 20% that that take all of that into account and look at how that is the best solution for both parties. It's a lot to consider, and I ask that you just consider everything that's been said up to this point, as well as this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Next speaker will be Mary Smith. Good evening. And I have you down for 3 minutes at this point.
Yes, thank you, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes, welcome.
Oh, great. Thank you. My name is Mary Smith. My husband, Don, and I live at 100 Park Vista Drive in Georgetown. We bought our home in Parkview Estates just over 5 years ago after having lived in the Barton Hills area of Austin for 27 years. I'm voicing Don's and my objection to the proposed rezoning of abstract number 235 to high-density multifamily zoning. At the Planning and Zoning Commission's meeting on January the 19th, Commission members heard numerous concerns expressed on the proposed rezoning to make way for Greystar's development of a high-density apartment complex at 903 River Haven Drive. These included concerns about the development's detraction from the comprehensive plan Scenic Corridor and the Legacy Park, the intent of the Williams family with respect to their land donation, the massive height and size and resulting blocked views of the beautiful park, the increased population and automotive density in the area, along with limited parking and dangerous traffic, particularly for senior citizens, walking, running, and park safety, and the City of Georgetown's plans for already approved reconstruction projects near the location. Another expressed concern, and Scott mentioned this again this evening, was the need to find an alternative retention pond for Parkview Estates because the proposed complex would cover up the one provided for this purpose. It seems to Don and me that the community objections are fundamental and well summarized by our long-term resident statement on January the 19th. And I quote, "This is a bad idea for this location," and I quote again, "leave the zoning as it is to be better served." And this is the point I particularly want to emphasize tonight. The likely consequences of rezoning the entry to San Gabriel Park to high-density multifamily are evident simply by looking 30 miles to the south. That is, at the after effects of the construction of the massive condominium and apartment complexes that now line Barton Springs Road in Austin. What used to be a quaint corridor in an area filled with beautiful trees that lead from downtown Austin into the jewel of Austin is now a highly congested, densely populated road that leads into what has become a seriously overcrowded Zilker Park with little in the way of parking for those who arrive there after noon on sunny weekends. Please don't let this happen to the area next to our jewel in Georgetown. This proposed rezoning would begin the process of chipping away at our own diamond. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. We appreciate your comments. Next, I have Mary Fields. Welcome.
Can you hear me?
We can now. Welcome.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. My name is Mary Fields. I live on Gann Street in Parkview Estates. And I just wanted to, again, voice my opinion on the change, the huge leap from the current zoning to the multifamily high density zoning. The change, assuming a change to multifamily to high density, it's a change that would remain in place regardless of whether this particular project is built. And so with that in mind, the proposed design alternatives would be irrelevant. And those revisions, you know, if they were to do those, why wouldn't they request a simple change to multifamily 1, which would avoid any need for having covenant restrictions? And we're looking at, again, what Mr. Petrosky mentioned with the Scenic Gateway, and I would just ask for all the board members to remember what a scenic gateway is intended to look like. And I just hope you can keep that in mind when you're making your decision on this case. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your comments this evening. I have Steve and Suzanne Bouchel.
Good evening. This is Suzanne Buckley. My husband Steve and I live on Rio Vista Drive in Parkview Estates. And I would like to echo some of the things that Scott, our Homeowners Association president, said. And I guess the previous speaker, Mary, as well, that along a scenic corridor, as Mr. Petrowski said, the idea is to prioritize lower density development along a scenic corridor, and multifamily 2 may, as he said, may be considered too intense. I think I would consider it too intense as well. And I think really it's just the density of the project that I think a lot of us are worried about. As Mr. Petrowski said, the goal is 5 to 14 units per acre, and they're talking about 24 units per acre. And it's just, I think, and as the Mary Smith also noted about Barton Creek Park, Zilker Park in Austin. It's very true that it detracts from the character of the park when you have these multi-story developments surrounding it. So I just wanted to echo those particular things, but to also just say that in general, I think Scott speaks for us as well as I think most people in Parkview Estates. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Michelle. Appreciate it. Next speaker is, and I'm going to botch this, but I apologize, Desiderio Roybal.
That's fine. It's Desiderio Roybal, but
I apologize.
That's fine. I go by Desi. I don't live in the Parkview neighborhood. I am currently the vice president of the Katy Crossing Homeowners Association, which is adjacent to Parkview. I've been on the board now for 16 years. I moved into Katy Crossing in 2000. 8 of those years I served as president. I come to the meeting not representing Katy Crossing. I'm coming to it as just a private citizen in opposition to the development. And while I understand Parkview's concerns, and I agree with all of them, I look at it in terms as a resident that uses San Gabriel Park. I commend the city for the development they've done in the park. It's a beautiful park. The basketball courts that are now under the flyover is wonderful to see youth hanging out there and playing. It's a vibrant part of the city with the hike and bike trail now. Our neighborhood is connected to downtown Georgetown. And so in the recent plan that was submitted by pushing the apartments towards the park, I think that's even worse because now you've forced the residents of Georgetown to have to look at a development, a wall of concrete. Georgetown, to have this park in its center of the city, so close to downtown, and seeing what the development that's happening in Georgetown, I think finding a better way to use this would be advantageous, and it goes along with the developments that have already happened, in the park. I think the youth of Georgetown would find this area useful for a community center of some type, something for teens. It's already used by teenagers. For 14 years, I've partnered with the Boys and Girls Club of Georgetown. I teach a course in the summer, and I've seen how the Boys and Girls Club has grown and blossomed, and now they're currently at Carver Elementary. But what I also see is I don't see a place for teens. It's primarily 6 through age 12. And by the time you get to the teen years, there's no place for them to go. I think this would be a great opportunity to find a way to develop this property or keep it a single family so that the view for all of Georgetown is preserved. I don't see a wall of concrete. If it's along 971 or if it's on Riverhaven Drive, all of those I think will detract from the beauty of the park. And the city has done such a wonderful job to make it just a great respite for all of Georgetown. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your comments. Next will be Mark Caramelic.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes. Welcome.
Thank you very much for this time and for this opportunity. I just wanted to express.
Before you start, please, could you give us your name and address?
Yes, my name is Mark Caramelic. I live on Park Circle. So my property is pretty much right up against FM 971, and this really irks me, I guess I should say, because it was the previous speaker was hit it pretty much right on the spot for me. We purchased our house primarily because of the location to the park, and this would seriously just make it so that, I mean, it would, I don't know how to say it correctly, but it would diminish the value of the park to the community. And it's just there's no other buildings, I should say, in our community that are 3 stories high. So even if it was 3 stories, based on the plans that were proposed, I see that there would be some units there that would have clear view right into my backyard, even if it was just 3 stories. I know that the zoning approves up to 45 feet, but to me, that's, I didn't even know that. So if just from a perspective of a regular homeowner there, the reasons why I bought the property, the beautiful park that's there, it would just, I don't know, it would make it so that it would be a much less desirable area. And I really hope that the city develops it in a different manner that would be more suitable with either single family homes or something that would accentuate the park more. So that's all I had to say. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Appreciate your comments this evening. Kai Browning.
Hello. Thank you so much for all the work that the P&Z is doing for the city of Georgetown.
Please, ma'am? Kai, could we get your address, please?
Sorry, yes, my name is Key. It's K-I, Key Browning,
Sorry.
and I'm at 101 Benchmark Street. Make sure that I can hear you. Oh, let's see. Me? Oh, wait. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead, please.
Okay. I'm sorry. I don't know if I did that right. Okay, so I'm Key Browning. I'm at 101 Benchmark Street. And just tonight, my husband and I went to the park, and we had to wait from our neighborhood to cross and wait for about 40 cars to pass at about 5:45 today before we could even get into the park from Parkview Estates, crossing 971 into the park. And there's already a lot of congestion on 971. And it's obvious that at some point in the next 5 years or however long, that 971 will be expanded, and that will be needed clearly. But that's not yet. We don't have that yet. And so having an 3 or 4 story apartment complex there clearly is out of place with a park. And I don't know if you're familiar with Frisbee golf, but as we were driving into the park, we could see there's all of these people, 15 or so people playing Frisbee golf right there. And then basketball right there as well, another 10 to 15 guys playing. It just, there's such a use of the space there that's slow, walking. People are gazing around at the trees and the sunset and enjoying a park. And so more congestion, more cars, more people, it just is counterintuitive to the whole element of being in a park. And it does diminish the value of the park, which is a jewel that the city of Georgetown has provided, has saved for the citizens and nurtured. So, and the Parks and Recs are doing a great job in maintaining the value there. So having an apartment complex when there's already so many other apartment complexes nearby, I mean, clearly we don't need another one. So it just is very out of place here. And it is just a gym. The park is a gym, and we're going to need to maintain the beauty and the elegance of nature as Georgetown continues to grow. And so again, I just want to thank you and everyone in planning and zoning and the city for all that you're doing. I know it takes a lot of time and effort, and it's a volunteer position. And so really thank you all so much for giving us your time and helping us with this situation right now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Those are all the hands that I have had raised on the chat or the chat board. Let me see. I'm going to give one last call for one more speaker. If anybody wants to do it, this is your moment to do it. If not, we'll move on.
Chair, I do believe that we have a Mr. Pope standing by with Miss Regina Watson, who wanted to speak.
Okay, do I see there?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead then. Mr. Pope. Yes.
My name is Bobby Pope. I live at 401 FM 971, which is not 600 foot away from this project. Actually, it'll be maybe 150 foot from it. I've lived there since 1967. I've lived here all my life, and to me, Georgetown has always tried to keep their passages from the north, the south, the east, west into Georgetown, tried to keep the skyline of the city, the downtown square, and the park, and where it's a scenic trip into town. And the city of Georgetown has done a good job, but all down Austin Avenue maintaining that. And now we have the opportunity to finally finish it off by leaving this open for the rest of the time, as far as that goes, when you talk about the view of the park and the city. I don't know, this project to me would add as many adults as all of Parkview Estates adults. Practically, it'd be very few less. And as far as the traffic pattern going in and out of this project, there's only 3 ways away from it. One is down at Gann Street, and the other is up here at Park Circle Vista Drive, and then into the park on College Street. And the ones on Parkview Vista Drive and Gann are not very good access to leave this project. So to me, look like all your traffic's going to go right through the center of the park and up College Street into town. And I don't know, I just think when you purchase a property, you know what the zoning is at that time. So live by what the zoning is when you bought it. Don't come in and try to change it all to, I guess, fit your pocketbook, whatever you want to call it. And I just think as many people as you got opposed to it sure outweighs, look like to me, the decision to change it. But Anyway, I guess that's pretty much all I've got to say about it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Pope. All right, last call. All right, not seeing any more hands go up. I'm going to close the public hearing. And at this point in time, if the applicant would like to respond to the comments that have been made, you may do so. You're not obligated to do so, but if you do, you can have up to 3 minutes to address the comments that you've heard this evening, if you choose.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I would like to take that opportunity. Obviously, lots of comments for 3 minutes, but really appreciate the continued feedback. And as Mr. Scott said, we also appreciate the cordial discussions that we've been having. And we respect their opinion. We absolutely understand where they're coming from, and are just trying to find a happy medium here. So I was taking notes. I've got a few that I want to touch on here. In terms of the question marks about what the building would look like, we don't know yet because it's not designed. That's true, but under the Land Development Code, that's why we have design standards for each use. So we'd be adhering to those, and those have been thoughtfully put together by the city and approved by council for that exact reason, because obviously it takes lots of time to fully design a project. Regarding the pool facing 971, that would be approximately a football field away from 971. So imagine yourself on the goal line and looking to the next goal line, and that would be landscaped. The Scenic Gateway Corridor calls for natural grasses and rocks and boulders. So there'd be quite a bit in between there and where you would see residents enjoying the amenities. Regarding best and worst design sides of our project, whether facing 971 or the park, we don't design with a back of the building. All sides are treated with the design intent that they will be seen, and you can see that on any of our existing developments to date. We won't stick you with a really cruddy back of the building. Let's see. Regarding Miss Fields, remembering what a scenic corridor should look like. Michael, would you mind please go into the last slide of the presentation? I would just emphasize that, and also to those saying leave it as is. I think Michael's going to help me out with showing some existing conditions that are on the site today. That's not what a scenic corridor is meant to be, and we plan to improve that with professional landscape architects. All right, while Michael's pulling it up, and then maybe we can revisit that. Thank you for your help, Michael. Let's see. Mr. Caramelic, living on Park Circle and enjoying the park as all residents do. Your walk to the park right now doesn't include any sidewalks. You have to walk alongside these highly trafficked roads. We're trying to bring things that are going to help the community as well. Thank you, Michael, for pulling this up. I think we can see that now. This project has windows that are boarded up and then kicked in. There's broken glass. The current owner is reporting that police calls are being made to the site. This isn't how it's meant to be. And then, let's see. And in terms of the traffic, Ms. Browning, absolutely understand that 971 is highly trafficked because of the development that's going on to the northeast of the site. This is a major arterial, and the capacity of which is determined by the city engineers and addressed, like you mentioned, by possible expansions. One thing that we mentioned last time, and Michael, actually, do you mind sliding a few more?
Just a second, Mr. Walsh. I've offered you 3 minutes to respond. I'd like you to wrap this up, please.
Yes, sir.
You're past that 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you, and sorry about that. The last thing that I'll finish on that point then, and regarding the traffic, a few more slides, Michael, we touched on last time. I'm just going to remind that there's a traffic and parking slide. That age-restricted communities generate significantly less traffic during those peak rush hours when you're having a hard time, like at 5:45 tonight, to get to the park. It's like an eighth or a tenth of the number of trips that single family generates, which is the current zoning. So, Mr. Chairman, thank you for allowing me to wrap that up.
All right, thank you. I appreciate it. So with that, I will close the public hearing. And commissioners, as to this item, what is your recommendation to the city council?
Ursula, this is Sheree. Based on the feedback that I've heard this evening, my recommendation to the city council is that we deny this zoning map amendment.
Tell me, you cut out. Would you tell me again what your motion is?
I'm sorry, I'm having internet issues. I am, based on the feedback, I am putting forth a motion to deny.
Motion to deny.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so we have a motion on the floor to deny the application as submitted. Do I have a
Ursula, it's Jay. I'll second.
Okay. All right, commissioners, any questions or comments regarding this application and the motion?
Well, I think back to the petitioner's request, I really think it's a height issue more than anything else. And I know that maybe the HOA is not working, playing nice or what have you, but the C1 properties that are on 971 that butt up against Parkview are going to interfere with people's views and everything just as well. It just seems like there needs to be some communication, a little bit of give and take maybe on both sides. I don't know. I know I'm not in favor of a 4-story building or the potential of a 4-story building over there. It does need to be developed. It just needs to be developed in a way that where it's a win-win. That's all I got.
Point of procedure, Mr. Commissioner?
No, this is discussion just amongst us now, Mr. Walsh.
Mr. Chairman, this is Marlene McMichael.
Welcome.
I live right next to a senior community that was originally zoned as local commercial, and it changed, and I actually find that to be a good thing. It does produce less traffic than residential. It is, I don't remember, it's 4 stories, but I know it's at least 3 stories, and it's an appropriate fit in the community. I see this type of development as less dense than the number of single family homes that would go there, and less traffic. And so I'll be voting against this motion.
Okay. Any other comments, Travis or anyone else?
Yeah, so this is Travis. I'll just comment. I think my issue lands where it generally does on these zonings, where, I totally understand that they're making the offer to do X, Y, and Z, but at the end of the day, the zoning is the zoning, and we could rezone this MF2 and then they could show up and build to their maximum allowed density, or they could turn around and sell it to somebody who's going to do the same thing. So my issue lands there more so than with what they've proposed that they want to do.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Salyer, any comments?
No, sir.
Okay. Let me just say that this application has bothered me a lot, mostly because I see the value of this site for a use greater than what's there today. I've been bothered for years with the deterioration that's gone on at that location. I drove around the site over there and realized that I drove up and down the streets where everybody signed the petition, and in most of those cases, the tree cover so heavy, it's the only way you're going to see the park, from my perspective, was to come down Park Vista or Gann or Parkview. Most of the residences up there can't see the park today. At least it's from my perspective when I drove around. That being said, the crown jewel of Georgetown has to be downtown first and the park second, or it may be the other way around for some people. But that park is important. It's been an important part of my family. Watching my kids there, I really don't want to see anything negative happen there. But I'm like, I share the same sentiments that Marlene expressed, in that one of the least obtrusive uses you have is a seniors housing project. And frankly, the seniors are the folks that, and the retirees are the folks that would probably be out walking down using the park as well. So that use fits, and I can see some benefit for people who retire there from that location. But at the end of the day, my decision comes down to the fact that the MF2 zoning is cut and dry. Everything changes in life. Mr. Walsh cannot be here tomorrow. I cannot be here tomorrow. Somebody else on this piece of property, and they're not a party to all the discussions and all of the promises made. And so they are left with whatever benefits the entitlements grant to them, and that grants the ability to do the 4-story building. And so at the end of the day, I am not going to support an application for a 4-story building. So those are my comments. And with that, Myrna, I'd ask you to call the roll, please. And then remember, the motion is to deny. So when you're voting yes, you're voting to deny, or you're voting no, you're voting against denial.
Sheree Heinzman,
Yes.
Marlene McMichael.
No.
Did you say no? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
You did.
I did,
Oh.
yes.
Travis Frizius,
Yes.
Jay Warren,
Yes.
Jim Sawyer,
Yes.
Ursula Brashear.
Yes. So the motion to deny passes 5-1. Okay, thank you. That takes us to discussion items. Sophia, any updates or announcements?
The only announcement I have right now is that the mayor's commissioner appointments has been delayed until March 9th. And so if you were an outgoing member, we're asking for one more meeting of your time in order to accommodate for that adjusted schedule that mayor and council will have to make appointments on this meeting, make appointments for this commission. Other than that, just to thank you again for being willing to come to a special meeting tonight.
So I will tell you that I was so excited about the fact that my term was expiring on February 28th that I've already scheduled an event for March the 2nd. And that is to get my second COVID shot as it stands right now. And I promise you, I know which one is more important. So I'm likely not to be here for that meeting, but I'll let you know if that changes.
Well, in that case, just in case we miss you, Ursula, thank you. A sincere note of gratitude for the leadership that you've brought, for the efforts that you've put into every meeting, and just thank you very much.
I appreciate that. All right, folks, next meeting for all of you who gather will be March the 2nd, 2021, and that's a teleconference starting at 6 p.m. Thank you for your patience this evening, and good evening.
Well, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Yeah, well, no, I don't. I'm going to leave this one open. I'm sorry, I need a motion to. Yeah, see, I was so hurried. I'm in a hurry to get out of here.
I move that we adjourn.
Okay, Jay. Second.
And this is Marlene, I'll second it, but I also wanted to add my appreciation to you, Mr. Chairman, for all you've done and how you've led this commission.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Quickly call the roll here. I'm going to get teary-eyed.
I told you not to forget your script. Sheree Heinzman,
Yes.
Marlene McMichael,
Yes.
Travis Berthius,
Yes.
Jay Warren,
Yes, ma'am.
Jim Sawyer,
Yes.
Ursula Brashear.
Yes, and we are adjourned at 8:23. Thank you.
Thank you.
all.